And not like really in the SEAL training program, because I went in there and I was unprepared, and I was for sure not like, I shouldn't have. I was gonna graduate because like I just never was gonna.
Dan Bilzerian went from an unknown trust fund kid to one of the most recognizable internet personalities on the planet, almost overnight. His rise was loud, flashy, and impossible to ignore. And for a while, it looked unstoppable. Guns, luxury, non-stop flexing, and zero apologies. But that same meteoric rise came with an equally brutal crash that turned him into one of the most controversial figures online. Between the oversized ego, shaky business ventures, and endless questions about his money, Dan became a walking lightning rod for backlash and criticism. To understand why, you have to look at where it all started. His father, Paul Bilzerian, was a major Wall Street corporate raider in the 1980s. He made serious money through aggressive takeovers, but that success didn't come clean. Paul was later convicted of securities fraud and tax violations, leaving a permanent stain on the family name. By 1989, the government accused him of hiding assets inside family trusts to dodge roughly $62 million in fines and back taxes. That wasn't a rumor, it was on record. And that detail matters a lot. Years later, people started asking whether Dan's over-the-top lifestyle was really self-made, or quietly fueled by money that was never supposed to be touched. That question never disappeared. Dan grew up privileged, but discipline wasn't part of the package. He bounced between schools, clashed with authority, and struggled to follow rules anywhere he went. Structure never stuck. Eventually, Dan enrolled in Navy SEAL training, a move he still talks about constantly. He claims he was only days away from graduating before getting kicked out over a safety violation at the shooting range. Sounds intense, right? But this is where things get messy fast. Former Navy SEALs publicly challenged that story, saying Dan was dropped much earlier in training and never came close to finishing. That gap between Dan's version and reality would become a pattern. After his military dream collapsed, Dan pivoted hard and claimed poker saved his life. According to him, he became a high-stakes poker pro, winning over $50 million at the tables. That story became the backbone of his entire persona, the self-made poker millionaire living wild and free. There was just one problem though, almost no solid evidence backs it up. Poker pros and industry insiders repeatedly questioned his results, his skill level, and whether those massive wins ever happened at all. When you actually check the records, the image cracks fast. Dan Bilzerian has almost zero legitimate tournament winnings on file. Players who've shared tables with him describe his game as painfully average at best. No legendary reads, no killer instincts, just vibes and a lot of money on the table. Back in 2014, Dan claimed he won $10.8 million in a single night playing against a billionaire. Sounds insane, right? But when people asked for proof, there was nothing. No receipts, no hand histories, no credible witnesses stepping forward. When professional players pressed him on it, Dan didn't clarify or explain.
We be making fun of our parents for believing everything on the internet, but don't act like this man didn't have us all fooled. Meet Dan, and you see, Dan had a problem.
He snapped, defensive, hostile, and quick to lash out. Inside the poker world, the label stuck. Most players see him as a trust fund kid splashing money, not a real pro grinding skill. But here's the real twist. At that point, the truth didn't even matter anymore. Dan had stumbled onto something way more powerful than poker tables: social media. In the early 2000s, Instagram found Dan, and Dan knew exactly how to play it. He flooded feeds with guns, women, private jets, exotic beaches, and stacks of cash. The image was addictive, viral, and perfectly engineered to hijack attention. The formula was dirty, but it was genius. Every post was engineered to trigger envy, desire, shock, and outrage all at once. Dan wasn't just flexing, he was shoving the fantasy straight into people's faces. Guns, women, jets, cash, chaos. You couldn't scroll past it even if you hated it. By 2013, his follower count exploded past 32 million. And just like that, he was crowned the king of Instagram. Love him or hate him, his brand was pure excess and non-stop indulgence. And anytime someone asked the obvious question, so how did you make all this money? The answer never changed. Poker. Every time. Poker did it all. That confidence hooked young men instantly. They didn't just follow him, they idolized him. They wanted the life, the attitude, the reckless freedom. Hollywood noticed too. Dan popped up in movies like Lone Survivor and The Equalizer, rubbed shoulders with A-list celebrities, and became famous simply for being rich and reckless. But here's where the pressure started building. That lifestyle burns cash fast, and those mysterious poker winnings funding it all started looking shakier by the day. With millions watching his every move, Dan realized clout alone wasn't enough anymore. He needed to flip fame into real money and finally silence the critics. On paper, the plan sounded solid. In 2014, Dan launched Ignite International, a cannabis lifestyle brand pushing CBD products, vodka, and flashy merch. But the products weren't the real focus. Dan himself was the marketing engine. The strategy was loud and reckless. Sell the fantasy first. Guns, models, jets, mansions. Worry about the business later. For a short time, the hype worked. Then 2019 hit hard. When Ignite went public on the Canadian Stock Exchange, the curtain got ripped wide open. Financial filings showed the company was bleeding money at an alarming pace. This wasn't a slow stumble. It was a full-on meltdown. In 2019 alone, Ignite reportedly lost over $50 million. That wasn't growth pain. That was collapse. So where did the money go? According to reports, a massive chunk funded Dan's personal lifestyle. Private jets, luxury mansions, rentals, non-stop parties, and models paid to pose for brand content. Ignite spent more money feeding Dan's image than building an actual business.
There was a couple of issues, safety violation or something, but if they really liked him, like they did me, they'd have done anything to get him through training, and I certainly had some help.
Investors weren't backing a company. They were bankrolling a persona. Things got uglier when former Ignite president Curtis Heffernan resigned and went public. He accused Dan of treating Ignite like his personal piggy bank. He didn't mince words. He claimed Dan's Los Angeles mansion cost around $200,000 a month in rent, and Dan didn't pay it. The house, the flights, the yachts, the models, all of it allegedly went on Ignite's corporate tab. Investors got crushed, Ignite's stock price collapsed, millions vanished, and Dan kept posting like nothing happened. Yachts, smiles, zero stress. At that point, the business failure wasn't shocking anymore. It felt inevitable, and the chaos didn't stop there. In 2014, adult film actress Janice Griffith sued Dan after a photo shoot incident where she was thrown off a roof toward a pool and missed, breaking her foot. Another scandal stacked onto an already messy legacy. Dan's response only made things worse. Instead of accountability, he blamed the photographer and showed no remorse afterward. That cold reaction shocked a lot of people and poured gasoline on the backlash building around him. In 2015, another ugly headline dropped. Dan was banned from a Miami nightclub after allegedly kicking a woman during a chaotic brawl. The woman sued him, and the case was settled out of court. Once again, lawyers and money kept things quiet, but the story never disappeared. More women later came forward describing disrespectful and aggressive behavior. Most cases never reached trial and were reportedly handled behind closed doors. Still, the pattern was impossible to ignore. Controversy followed Dan everywhere, even as his Instagram kept selling a flawless fantasy that no longer matched reality. Then the business side completely collapsed. Ignite International was slammed with lawsuits from investors and former employees accusing the company of fraud, mismanagement, and broken contracts. The carefree Playboy image cracked wide open. Behind the yachts and models was a man drowning in legal chaos and financial pressure. In 2020, Ignite officially filed for bankruptcy. The company that was supposed to legitimize Dan as a serious businessman imploded, wiping out millions in investor money. Financial records exposed the full scale of the disaster. Over $100 million burned with almost nothing to show for it. Assets were liquidated, pieces sold off, and investors were left holding nothing. But here's the real shocker. Through all of this, Dan never slowed his lifestyle down. According to reports, he was still drawing money from family trusts, the same trusts tied to his father, Paul Bilzerian. In 2020, a court ordered Paul to pay $62 million related to a decades-old securities fraud case. Prosecutors argued those trusts were used to hide assets, and suddenly, Dan's entire self-made story started unraveling in real time. The poker millionaire image? Possibly a myth. The savvy businessman, a complete failure. And that lifestyle everyone envied, now widely believed to be fueled by allegedly hidden family money. With pressure closing in from every angle, Dan made a choice: silence. He stopped doing interviews, stopped answering tough questions, stopped addressing scandals entirely. Instead, he kept posting on Instagram like nothing was wrong, hoping the noise would fade on its own. But the damage was already done. As his reputation tanked and his businesses collapsed, Dan followed the classic washed-up influencer playbook. He pivoted straight into crypto and coaching. In 2021, he began promoting cryptocurrency projects, lending his face and name to schemes that left followers holding worthless tokens once the hype died. NFTs, meme coins, exclusive investment plays. Every pitch ended the same way. Big promises, big losses, zero accountability. On top of that, Dan rolled out lifestyle coaching and business courses, charging thousands to teach people how to live like him. The irony was brutal. A man whose company went bankrupt was now selling success advice. The backlash hit fast. Critics called the courses scams, pointing out the advice was generic, recycled, and freely available online, just repackaged with fake confidence and empty motivation. Even loyal fans started backing away. His follower count stalled, engagement dropped hard, and the algorithm that once pushed him everywhere quietly buried his posts. Instagram had moved on. Dan was fading into irrelevance, desperate to reclaim attention. He launched a podcast. Nobody cared. He tried rebooting Ignite under a new structure. Investors weren't interested. Each comeback attempt looked weaker than the last, exposing just how far the so-called king of Instagram had fallen. Even then, Dan tried one more angle. He teased a run at politics, hinting at a possible campaign. No support, no momentum, just noise. In 2022, he dropped a book called The Setup, marketed as a tell-all autobiography that was supposed to explain everything. Instead, it flopped hard. Critics dragged it, readers mocked it, and most people said it was packed with the same exaggerated stories and unverifiable claims that followed Dan his entire career. Then came another rebrand. He tried positioning himself as a men's rights advocate and free speech warrior, aligning with controversial figures and platforms. That didn't land either. The audience had already moved on. By 2024, his brand of excess, shock value, and fake rebellion felt outdated and tired. By 2025, Dan was a shadow of what he once claimed to be. His following was still in the millions, but the engagement was gone. Posts that once broke the internet now barely made a ripple. The parties got smaller, the jets were rented. The lifestyle looked staged. Behind the scenes, pressure kept building. He was still dealing with legal fallout tied to Ignite's bankruptcy, along with lawsuits from former partners and investors. His father remained tangled in legal trouble too, keeping questions about Dan's money front and center. Dan still posts occasionally, trying to sell the illusion, but anyone paying attention can see through it now. The mansions are rentals, the jets are chartered for photos, the women are paid models. It's all smoke and mirrors. He's not broke, but he's not the billionaire playboy he pretended to be either. His story isn't just a downfall, it's a warning about ego, about materialism, about building an identity on flexing instead of substance. If you enjoyed this breakdown, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone who needs to see it, and drop your comments down below. Let me know who you want covered next, and I'll see you on the next one.